How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's video we are looking at the aufklärungspanzer panther, the tier 7 light tank on World of Tanks console. This one is an absolutely fantastic one. You can pick it up for 2,000 gold at the moment, and it definitely is worth that if you haven't already got this tank in your garage. If you haven't, then this review should hopefully actually help you decide on whether you want to pick this tank up. I'm going to do an equipment overview at the end of the video, and obviously the commander overview at the end as well. But for the majority of this video, we are going to be getting into some gameplay. We're going to do live gameplay. Hopefully we can have some good games. If we don't, it's unfortunate, but it should showcase you the sort of positions that tend to work well in the aufklärungspanzer panther, and we'll get right into that now. So, the aufklärungspanzer panther, what is special about it? Well, it's a light tank that can go like 60 kilometers an hour in a panther hole. It's like the tier 7 Panzer 5-4 in terms of how well it can actually perform against the opposite number in terms of light tanks. So if you're coming up against enemy light tanks, you can 100% out damage them if you ram them. You want to be aiming for ramming the opponents as well as hitting them on the move. So ensuring that you have good accuracy, and also some things to boost up the speed of this tank can actually mean that you can outtrade a lot of tanks in the game. Remember, you are a panzer or a panther, so that means that you can actually ram lower tier medium tanks. You can ram pretty much any of the lower tier tanks that you come up against. It kind of plays like a really fast medium tank, so you kind of have to think about that in terms of when you're going to be progressing down certain flanks and where you choose to go in the aufklärungspanzer panther. Now, you do have the benefits of being a light tank in terms of your spotting, so you can outspot opponents fairly easily. Turret armor of this thing is pretty weak, so don't go relying on that, but the hull armor comparatively to other light tanks is so much better, which means when you come up against them, you can actually bounce shots, and they're unlikely to, just because of the way that their tank tends to play. Now, I think in this sort of gameplay, what we are going to do, I don't know why the Jagdpanther is actually looking that way, but we are going to spot. Now, obviously, trying to get as much damage at the start of the game is something you want to be doing, and luckily we got all of the assistance on that, which is really nice. The SU-100Y is tending to come out. We're going to put one into him. We did get a bit more assistance damage because we must have hit his track right there. I wasn't aiming for it, so I'm not going to claim like I was. But yeah, we've had a decent game so far. You know, it's not bad. We haven't taken any damage in return, and we've dealt a decent amount of damage back. Now, are we going to have the most fantastic game? We could ram this AMX EOC, which, you know, for the content I am going to do. But unfortunately, this medium tank has done it before us, so he's kind of messed up my whole strategy here. But yeah, what we are going to do now is we're going to progress the flank. I tend to say that you shouldn't push this kind of area, because what happens is often if opponents go up onto that ridge over there, they can actually hit you. So what you need to do, if you are going to push up aggressively like this in your light tanks, you want to take this right hand side so that the opponents can't hit you in the back. Remember, there's always usually someone sat up on the hill, and since we saw a tree go down just a second ago, if you did catch a glimpse of that, there is more than likely someone going to be sat up there as we spot the Hellcat 105 there. Now, this is where you love to be in the aufklärungspanzer panther, not spotted, pumping rounds into enemy tanks where they can't even just deal any damage back to you. You know, the alpha damage of this is fairly low, but what it does offer is the speed and the rate of fire, which means that, you know, for the majority of situations you can actually just pump opponents. What we're going to do now is slightly angle, which you can do in this tank. Obviously against a Tiger you're unlikely to bounce anyway, but what we will do is just try and out-traverse him. We've gone the opposite way, which unfortunately hasn't worked. But what we are going to do, he's bounced again, and now we're going to just finish him off, hopefully. There we go. So yeah, a good game so far. And this is the kind of games you can expect in the aufklärungspanzer panther. People on PC call this the awful panther, but on console, for sure, this thing is so much better. The accuracy buffs means that it hits on the move so much more, and it has that speed, it has the potential to ram enemy light tanks, and if you're interested in kind of going into light tanks and you've never played them before, then a tank like this is perfect for you, because what happens is, you have the opportunity to occasionally get let off when you make a play like that maybe not necessarily the best idea that you've ever had. You had a rush of excrement to the brain, and what's happened is, you've taken a shot, but luckily it's bounced off the armor because this tank actually has it. That's not guaranteed. You're not necessarily going to guarantee yourself any armor or any bounces in a game, but what it does do is it will show you the way in terms of getting into the light tank playstyle, spotting opponents and getting some assistance damage. With the high rate of fire means that you can track opponents that you come up against, you can deal damage really, really quickly, output that damage, move away, and have some fantastic games. We came top in this game, very, very quick one. We racked up 2,000 damage. It was only like a 5-minute gameplay or 4-minute gameplay, where, unfortunately we capped, so we couldn't get any more, but we certainly could have made some more money in that game. 82,000 earned, which was actually really, really good, considering, we're playing in a tier 7 light tank. We didn't have to fire any premium that game, which is the kind of thing that kind of, I guess, balances the tank, because you do sometimes have to press A or X on PS4, but yeah, that's kind of the balancing of the tank. Sometimes you won't make as much silver because you have to fire premium sometimes. Not that you have to, but if you want to deal consistently more damage, sometimes people forget, they make this argument about silver, but sometimes if you don't do any damage, you're going to lose more silver than if you loaded premium and got a lot more damage, because obviously your silver earned is actually dependent on how much damage and assistance damage and destroyed you get per game. So making sure that you have more damage per game can sometimes actually lead to more silver. Right, so the second gameplay of this video is here on Kasserine. This is a decent map for a light tank, I guess. We've got decent matchmaker as well, which means we've got the potential to have a really good game on this one. It's much better than some of the maps that you can get. Obviously, you've got the room to maneuver in this thing, and you can actually handbrake turn in this thing really, really well. So if you don't have the handbrake controls on, I suggest you turn them on for playing in this tank, because what it can do is allow you to just handbrake turn around some of the enemies that you come in at. Obviously you can feint one way, so where you say that you're going left, and then right at the last second you turn right, and that kind of baits enemies into kind of swinging themselves the wrong way with their gun, and sometimes that will come in your favour. Obviously sometimes people can kind of deal with that depending on their kind of skill. Obviously if they're more skilled, they'll kind of understand that people tend to do that sometimes, but even then sometimes you can actually miss, and you see us handbraking turning here to make sure that we're going side on. That's because the gun depression of the tank actually gets better when you turn side on. That's because obviously when you're lengthways, it's got far more of a kind of like a slab to actually go into. You see what we're going to try and do now is actually hit these people, which you can do really, really quick. It's a good snapshot of this tank, and if you haven't already noticed, that's because its accuracy on the move is fairly decent. Obviously it's not the best tank to fire on the move in, because sometimes you need even better accuracy. It's no T100 LT, but what it is a tank that you can consistently hit when you're going kind of those mediocre speeds. When you're at top speed, it is somewhat difficult to hit on the move, but even then, when you're going 60 kilometers an hour, which is the top speed of this tank, you can still out-traverse opponents, and you can often have those fantastic games. You can see here what we can do is just deal damage slowly to opponents. What we have to be wary of is obviously anyone sat at the back, which sometimes happens on this map. Obviously kind of risky, and when you go side on, it does kind of leave the tank a little bit open to people just shooting you in the side, so you have to be careful with that. Obviously don't go too much side on, and if you're going to pull out side on in front of people, make sure that they have already fired, because there's nothing worse than a light tank just coming out to deal one shot of damage for 100 damage and taking multiple shots in return. We are going to try and hit this King Tiger here, but it's unlikely that we'll actually hit his cupola from here. Although, this is World of Tanks, so you never know what happens. Right. So we've had a decent amount of damage in this game, not the most fantastic game out there, but what we have done is just track that guy And what we will do, he's just fired, which means we can just consistently track him now. He did repair that, so that's a bit unfortunate. But now we can just take apart this VKP, and you can see the rate of fire of this tank and how much damage you can just pick up within the first couple of minutes of the game. Especially if you put yourself in the right position, you can definitely have these fantastic games. And yeah, you do have to be wary though. It's not necessarily a tank that you know, you should be YOLOing at the start. It definitely isn't like that, and light tanks should not be YOLOing whatsoever at the beginning of a game. It is not how you play a light tank. So when I see loads of people YOLOing in at the start of the game, it is just not that kind of tank. You know, you're not that fast and you are quite boxy, which means opponents can hit you fairly easily. So don't go YOLOing in. That's not how you play light tanks at all. And if that's one thing that you can take from this video, not to YOLO in, then, you know, my job is kind of done as far as I'm concerned, because that's one less player that, you know, will get removed so early on the team. And so, you know, hopefully that'll be good. Unfortunately, this guy has sat in front of us, which means that we couldn't actually perma-track that guy. Unfortunately. But now we are going to push in to get some more damage before the game ends, because I think what's going to happen here is we're just going to tear the rest of their team apart in the last bit of this game. Obviously they're all over here, so you know there's plenty of hit points to actually farm up. There's room for us to pull out some damage here. And luckily, what we hopefully will do, unfortunately we didn't pick him up, which is gutting. We bounce off the Trailblazer there. We won't bounce the second one though. What we are going to do now though is go in after this guy. Probably see this King Tiger switch from the T-77 to me, because you know sometimes they do that. Happiness. And this is kind of where it's just disgusting to have the DPM of this thing. Yeah, it's a decent tank, you know. You can have some fun, fast firing gun, decent armour. Unfortunately we didn't get to ram anyone, which is disappointing, because this tank it's so fun when you manage to actually ram someone, especially when they're a light tank. Obviously don't ram into heavy tanks because it's a panther hull. Be somewhat clever about it, use your brain. Obviously if you're playing in a medium tank technically, if that makes sense, because you've got the panther hull, you're that kind of heaviness, going up against other lightly armoured medium tanks at the same tier. Don't forget, you know, it can come up against tier 9, so don't go ramming tier 9 mediums because they're going to be heavier than you for the majority of situations anyway. But yeah, you can have some good games in this thing, and hopefully this video showcased you just what kind of things you can actually have in this game and the sort of playstyle you want to be using it as a fast firing light tank at tier 7. One of the better light tanks in my personal opinion, and it certainly is a good one to start off with if you haven't played a light tank before. So if you did enjoy this video, obviously stay tuned for the last bit of it to check out what sort of crew skills you want to be putting on a tank like this. Obviously it's relevant to other light tanks, so don't just click off thinking that I'm never going to use this equipment setup. It is a pretty standard light tank setup for a tank like this, so we'll get into that now, and then we will show you off some other videos that you can actually have a look at the end of this video. Now, equipment, what do you want? Improved ventilation, advanced loader, advanced optics. I would probably swap out improved ventilation for gun stabilizer at this point in the game, just to get that little bit of extra accuracy of 20%, which means, you know, you can have that more likelihood to actually hit on the move whilst you're auto-aiming, or if you're out-traversing someone. Also, it could be that you want to put on max speed to increase chassis and hull rotation speed and max speed by 10%, so you can go 66 kilometers an hour. It's going to be good for your ramming if you're interested in that in this tank. So yeah, those are the things you want to be using in this aufklärungspanzer panther in World of Tanks console. As far as crew skills go with, we have gone with a slight build. It's kind of my Panzer V4 crew, but it is relevant to this tank. So what we went with is Born Leader to get the 10% increase to skill effectiveness and crew performance. As with every single tank, you should have Born Leader on it, as well as Sixth Sense, which is the second perk. Then we've got rapid loading, rapid aim, we've got steady aim, we've got everything to increase the accuracy when moving and whilst during turret rotation. We've got clutch braking to just increase the vehicle whole rotation speed. So we can actually, out traverse, we can use the handbrake to spin around faster. Really, really useful. And that's something you want to be doing in this tank. And then we've got controlled impact, which you should probably split out for maybe situational awareness to get a little bit more view range in this thing, so you can outspot opponents. But it's up to you. For me personally, it's interesting when I ram someone. So, we'll take 20% less damage, they'll take 20% more damage. It's always fun when you have basically a 40% difference in the amount of damage that you deal to your opponent. Now, other than that, that is everything that you probably need to know about the aufklärungspanzer Panther. Is it worth it? Yes. The premium rounds, fantastic. Standard rounds, fantastic. Choose when you want to use them. Makes good money as well. You have good view range, you've got a good speed, you've got good armour for a light tank at tier 7, and yeah, it's a complete package in my personal opinion, and it's one that I've loved, so I am a little bit biased, I guess, with regards to the aufklärungspanzer Panther. I hope you guys pick it up, at least in-game, to give it a go, or you just enjoyed the video. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and if you want to check out more content, there should be some on screen. But I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.